as we know, children are very intuitive. They know what's going on in the world with coronavirus. In light of current events, now we are responding more directly to racism as well. And so what tools can you give parents to help utilize and have conversations and process with kids the information that they're consuming through news and social media and just conversations that they might be overhearing from us?
One key thing is to really understand, how are you being impacted by the coronavirus and racism? If you don't understand what's going on in your own heart, you are way more likely to just kind of spew information rather than being direct. And so if you find they're asking questions that you don't have answers for, it's okay to put a pause and just in humility say, that's a great question. I think I need to do some more reading. And I encourage you to read more than one resource. If you find I've never asked that, go and find more than one resource as to what's going on, so that when you're talking to your children, you may find that you are able to say with confidence, this is what I read, and I'm still trying to understand it. That's still a confident response. It's not saying to your child, I'm confused, so you should be confused too. It's saying, this is complex, and reminds me of this when I first heard the word ethnocentrism. And ethnocentrism is basically that when I try to say, I know your experience, that actually diminishes your experience. The best thing to do is always remain open and curious to understanding another person's perspective. So when they ask these questions, or they have questions that you feel overwhelmed by, being able to just model, I'm going to go find out and try to understand it from another person's perspective, not just live in the place where my perspective is the only one that matters here. So it's really a great way to help model what that would be. Yeah.
One thing that we found with one of our children is that they had terminology confused. And so they were equating riots and protests. And so we definitely had to clear up, what each of those terms mean.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Were they able, when you did that, how did that next conversation go?
It was almost like a little light bulb went off, oh, okay. Yeah. And then they could say, this I can get on board with, and this I still question or don't really understand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I found just in talking with my kids are very intuitive, and my 4-year-old son actually was struggling because with wearing the mask. He would keep asking if the virus is what he calls it, if the virus is still here. He'll say, we're going to the store, and I give my kids the option if they want to wear their mask or not, and my 4-year-old often does because it's really cool, and he feels like a superhero, and so he'll say, is the virus still here, Mom? Mm-hmm. And it's difficult because I'm finding that these conversations, I'm having to talk to them about loss and grief and reasons why we can't do things that we're accustomed to doing. And so, why can't we go play at so-and-so's house? Why can't we go do this or that? And I say, the virus is still here. And so those are hard conversations and often trigger places of loss and things that need to be grieved for even children. So looking into that, Aimee, just how would you navigate those conversations in places where kids are experiencing loss?
Loss is part of life, and I kind of hate it, I have to tell you. Loss, I can remember my girls, their first loss we had a conversation around was a canary that died, and that they were about 5 or 6, which then went on to be a conversation about my mom who died a couple of years, and we had the loss of divorce. But kids are experiencing loss because they had an unexpected end to their school year. There's so many transitions that are happening right now. So part of it is not saying that one loss is not putting it, that you shouldn't feel bad about that. That's a small loss. Allowing their loss to matter. And that prepares them actually for a lifetime of what it is to be able to be aware of what's happening, put words to it, to grieve it, which means I get to share with my words with somebody else what's happening. And then they have a story that grows with them the rest of their life that they have words around. That's very different than having a loss that they don't have words. We call it ambiguous loss, which is basically a loss has happened, but we don't know how to describe it. And compared to other bigger losses in our life, it seems small. But sometimes, as you know, as adults, those ambiguous losses sometimes are the ones that just you're sick to your stomach about. You're like, why do I miss that friend? They just moved. It was a great move because I miss my friend. So all of this goes back to, and we're going to do this again and again. Know what's going on with you. The more you know what's going on with you, as Christ is transforming your own life, then you're more able to be in uncomfortable conversations, no matter what they are, with your children. We are constantly growing. If you think of the pain of when they're little and you love them, and then all of a sudden they go off to kindergarten, like that prepares you for I know it's coming again, and every transition brings a loss. And that is part of what, as we're growing as parents, as we're helping our children grow with understanding loss, and that it's part of life.
So while talking with my 5th and 6th graders, many associated the riots that were going on in our nation as evil and expressed their fear around people bringing harm to others. So as parents, how can we bring light into these hard and controversial topics with our children? We touched on this a little bit, but as they're dealing with this fear, how can we bring a calming to that and also speak truth into what's happening?
Yeah. I would say there's this always interesting balancing act as a parent, right? So you own that you're actually feeling the emotion. It's not you're feeling scared. I have to be really brave, because that's what parents do. And you're actually also protecting. So you're saying, I'm sad that this is happening too. So anytime you can identify your emotions, and then there's this place where you don't, okay, so how do I say this? Identify that you're going through it without saying, now you carry around the backpack of my grief. So it's about me too, I'm experiencing this, but you're not responsible for my pain. So that is one of the key pieces, is listening, hearing, say, I understand, but making lots of room for them to share what it is that they're experiencing. Now, evil, that word gets interchanged sometimes. Did a child say actually?
Absolutely,
evil?
Yeah, they said, why is there evil in this world? Why are people so evil? Why are these riots feeling so evil?
Yeah.
And so, and as they spoke them, you could see the fear being transmitted from them. Yeah. It's a genuine fear that children are facing with what's going on in our world.
Yeah. I think depending on the age of the child. So we know that evil, or why is there this dissension, it's been all the way back from the beginning of time. So we do live in a broken, fallen world. And so I think what you're already doing is you're developing a theology of suffering, which is to live in this world. It is hard, and there is broken happening, and there is evil. But when we start declaring that people are evil, I think that is the part that we would want to be cautious and say, you're right, in this world, there is evil happening. But this is where you start to go, do I have hope? Do I have hope that there is something greater than brokenness in this world? And do I believe it? And so again, it's going to go back to that thing again where you start to say, I can acknowledge that there is brokenness in this world because I am aware that there is something so much greater than evil and brokenness. There is a God, a Christ, the Holy Spirit, a Redeemer that sees from the beginning to the end and has this presence. Like we don't even serve a God that does something in the future. We have a God that is present in the evil, so we're not alone in the evil.
And the way that I've communicated it to my own children is that evil is the absence of God. Like, evil is a rejection of the ways of God, the love of God. And so I've talked to them about God's grand narrative, because his desire is redemption, and that's the work he's doing in and through us. And so as I talk to my kids about that, I remind them of God's grand narrative, that he is present with us, like you said, Aimee, that he is a continuously working God on our behalf, and that even in these places where we experience evil, that there are still good works happening that we can draw their attention to.
Yeah. I wonder if they're asking the question of, I'm scared. Like, this is really hard to see people treat other people in such a way. I am scared that hand sanitizer used to feel like enough to not get sick. Like, their world in these short few months, many of our children's worlds have expanded exponentially. So if our theology of who God is growing, so is theirs. But what we all need more than a grand theology is we need a God that is present, a present comfort. So part of that is each child saying, tell me, like, if it's the one who says evil, what feels evil? I feel like when I see this, people being mean to each other. Well, why is it wrong for people to be mean to each other? Well, I feel bad when people are mean to me. Okay, so what do you need when somebody's being mean to you? Well, I need somebody to come along and love me and say, I'm here with you. And then then you get to introduce, that's the kind of friend you're called to be, and that's the Christ that comes who's experiencing suffering alongside us. And I think it's all those little opportunities, but we're sometimes the words they use, we're like, oh shoot, that's a big theological question. How do I bring that down to probably they're asking for comfort in a world that feels a little scary?